Great, calling Parks and Rec meeting to order. We stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So can you read roll call, please?
Clark.
Here.
Corbino.
Here.
Emily. Here. Easker.
Here.
Wyland.
Approval of minutes from previous meeting, April 22nd, 2024.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ermeling, second by Easter. Motion's been approved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any more in discussion? Oppose? Motion passed. Any public comment? We'll move to number 6, discussion and possible action. Friends of Community Local.
So part of the process with developing the marketing materials for Kennedy Park fundraising campaign was to try to develop a logo that could be utilized during the process. G Morty came up with a couple options. The Friends of Kennedy Park with both trees and Friends of Kennedy Park renovation, and then just a plain Kennedy Parks, Friends of Kennedy Park. So they also give us the option of customizing them based on who you're presenting to. So one of them that they proposed was like putting the logo on top of a home plate for baseball, or hockey sticks around it, you know, just to emphasize that, or, you know, something with the skate park, just based on the group that's presenting to fundraisers. So they'll probably use both of these logos interchangeably, depending on who they're presenting to. Staff likes the just Friends of Kennedy Park because it's all encompassing. It's not just the renovation part, but they could use both.
So did they decide on a name? Because I know that it was Friends of Kennedy Park, and then for a second it was Friends of Kennedy Park Reconstruction, and have they come up with a name?
Well, Friends of Kennedy Park is, I think, what they came up with. Sarah stated that she was keeping in contact with you. I don't know if she has been throughout the process. But that's, I think, what staff thought was good was Friends of Kennedy Park, but there's nothing official as far as what it is.
I think so I listened to the call with the Community Foundation, and I think that it wasn't just the Friends of Kennedy Park. I think it mentioned the reconstruction. So I think I have two things. One, they have to tell us what they're called so that, you know, we know. And then the second part of this is, are there any concerns that the integration of the Weston logo and an outside group would confuse this as communication coming from us?
I see your point, and I actually thought the same thing too, because of the logo, and because it's also part of the Marathon County logo.
Yeah.
Which that's how ours got designed. But I felt like if they're the group presenting it and we're not actually part of that request, I thought it could be okay. I could be totally off board with that, but think that just having those groups present, I don't know if it necessarily mattered what the logo was as far as part of it, but.
Yeah, so my thinking is that ultimately this is, the concern is that if they're out there fundraising under what looks like our flag and something goes horribly awry, then that can trickle back to us, right? I think that, and I've said this to Sarah, I think that since they are going to be a separate entity, I think that the sort of intermingling of resources is something that I would be concerned about, right? Because later on in in the notes or in the minutes, there was discussion last time about they were going to be the ones who were going to go out and seek out donations. And so I think that creates a separateness that I think needs to be considered. And I think that, Friends Kennedy Park renovation or Friends of Kennedy Park skate park expansion or whatever it is we're going to call it is fine. But I would be concerned having them essentially speak underneath the Village of Weston flag, essentially.
Could that be accomplished with a disclaimer on what they're putting out though for fundraising to say something like affiliated with, but not directly corresponding to Village of Weston? I mean, I think the piece that does incorporate a section of our logo makes sense because it's in the village and it's obviously coming here for approval, right? Like there's a piece of this that we are still involved in, so it makes sense to show some connection with the village.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's true, yes. And I did miss a meeting, but I do think that it's, given the minutes of last time, I think it's unclear as to the separation of roles in the project, right? So I when I read the meeting minutes, I have a concern about essentially giving up the role of seeking donations and fundraising to an outside entity. And I have a concern about the visualness of this. So, yeah, that's just me.
Now, could you possibly, where the little half circle here, where we have kind of our colors and our whatever, could they put maybe something, I mean, some ball diamonds, so what they're going to be fundraising on it, I mean, hockey sticks, something like that, rather than having kind of our.
We did have one that was similar to that, and our only concern was if we put some of them in, we didn't want to leave anybody out either, which is
What are we doing with Kennedy Park? What are
Right.
we putting in Kennedy Park?
Baseball. Correct,
And hockey.
not a Weston flag.
See, I think what Sean talked about a second ago was that if we take this graphic, that one up there, and then as the hockey dudes go out and seek funding, it gets customized by the graphic designer and another layer is added. And I think that makes sense to me, if hockey goes out, if baseball goes out, if softball goes out, et cetera. But but just from the start, I think that, like I said, I have concerns about this.
I think that's totally an option, like remove the half moon at the top. The logo, the rest of the logo is great, and then they can customize it because we had all these little cubes at the bottom. You had a little skater, you had little hockey sticks, but we felt like it got lost in it because it didn't stand out. I mean, of course, the home plate that encompasses the whole thing stood out for baseball.
Yeah, do we have that one that we can see? Was it one big baseball home plate behind it?
There was
or
one
it-
big home plate that encompassed the whole logo.
Okay. Like a
And
shadow?
they didn't customize, well, it's encompassed the whole logo, but they didn't customize the hockey or the skater yet, but it's something we discussed with them, just because we felt like each group need to have a part of it when they fundraised.
Well, that's kind of why I was thinking if you got rid of that, that kind of is a symbol of Weston, town, Village of Weston, Village of Weston. And if you just added Friends of Kennedy Park and then had
What they're fundraising.
what they're fundraising for, because each group is going in their own way. It isn't like they're,
And
you
every,
know,
yeah, sorry, and everybody knows that Kennedy Park is in Weston.
right. I mean, that's not.
I mean, is there an overall, so our logo in Weston is part of the Marathon County work as well,
Yes.
right? So, I mean, part of this is sort of an operational question. I mean, is there a guideline to say, you know, this, if someone requests to use the logo, is there a way that they would ask to use it? You know, because I can't just take the graphic and slap it on a pair of shoes, right? So but is there a way, if the business wanted to use the logo, is there a mechanism for them to ask to use it?
Is our logo copyrighted,
I don't remember.
trademarked?
Yeah, I think it was when we did it. No. Marathon Counties is.
Meredith County.
Yeah.
Yes.
And ours is sort of built out from there, but I don't know. I was just asking about the operational part of this. I mean, ultimately, they are going to be a separate body, and they're, you know, essentially going to be able to come up with whatever logos that they want to do. But yeah, just to start with, you know, I think, I mean, that's the Village of Weston's logo right there on top. And the requests aren't going to be coming from the Village of Weston. So.
Got a weird idea, and I don't know if it's even possible, but like instead of the half moon being like those blocks, I mean, what if like the green square is home plate, the beige square
Well, I thought about it too.
is a baseball, one's a hockey puck, one's a skateboard. I mean, is that
Do you have those
doable
other
or?
smaller logos we could show? Yeah, it's doable.
You know, I thought of that, but then I thought maybe it getting too busy or
I
something.
mean, maybe that's too busy, but I mean, it still kind of keeps the same, the theme, but it's not,
I'm not sure.
I mean, even the colors, maybe we go with like a green and yellow instead of the, you know, maroon and orange or something.
I'm not on the Zoom. I'm gonna see if I can pull up the other one that I don't think we can put it up on the screen, but I could at least just show it on my laptop.
Go ahead.
We did the fundraising for those pickleball courts in Marathon Park. But during the fundraising, it was just the pickleball courts. No Marathon County, nothing at all. It was just their own group, our own group, and they promoted and they raised.
So I like the idea that Michael has. I think you can still take that. So you can have your bicycles or what you have on the top. You can still kind of build on a Weston thing, but then when you go with baseball people, you can put it on the playground with a thing. If it's for hockey, you have two big cross sticks in the middle or whatever that is. So they can have an individual one for each one, but the like main one shows, and maybe the main one shows it in a baseball diamond, so.
Oh,
like, around
sure.
the perimeter.
What are
Oh,
the
yeah,
other
like-
ones?
Still has the
All?
five.
Yeah, I think you're gonna like this logo here then,
Yeah.
but I'm not crazy about the little squares underneath. I like
The
Michael's idea with
putting them
with
on
the
top.
dots, yeah,
Yeah, I
putting
thought of that
each
too.
sport in the dots there.
Yeah. That's what I say, get
I
rid of
don't-
that.
It's too dizzy. Too
Mhm.
busy bottom there.
And it gets our concern was that when you list some and not all, then does someone feel like, well, I would have contributed, but my sport's not
Well,
represented.
that's why
Yeah.
if you did that and put all those that are the hockey and the whatever.
Or we thought if you changed it for so it was specific to the
Yeah.
ask, that was the thought. Like if you, like when you start saying thank you and then you forget to, you know, cause there's always one, you try to be all encompassing, but
Did did their group have a preference?
I think this was their preference with the idea that they would change it slightly depending on who was making the ask.
Could they just take that half moon or whatever you wanna call it out and then leave that area for their own, you know, whatever they wanna put there. If it's if it's a baseball first base or if it's a hockey sticks or it's whatever, but they can do what they want, but get rid of the Western logo, if you will. I don't know.
I mean, the other thing is ultimately this is their logo. So, you know, they should sort of make these decisions. You know, I think that our role is as the Village of Weston is just to simply say, hey, you know, that's our logo. You know, we should have a discussion about whether or not our logo is in there. You know, if the Village of Weston decides to put out their own fundraising material for Kennedy Park, I think that then that's a discussion to have operationally with the staff, but in this case, it's theirs. So, I mean, the only real question is, for me, is am I comfortable with the Village of Weston logo being there?
So we didn't want to put their logo that we worked on just out there, so that's why we brought it to you to take a look at. Any thoughts on it? I mean, they did use it for the presentation, and if you've watched it, like you said, Dino, like they did utilize the renovation one
Yeah.
within it. Of course, there was a timeline, it was last Tuesday, but just to have something to put out there in front of the community foundation. You know, and we knew they were gonna use it, but we wanted to bring it in front of you.
I just, my personal, looking at this, if you take the half moon off, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't scream the Village of Weston, which I think is kind of what people are wanting. When I look at it, I mean, honestly, maybe because of the point in life I'm at, the trees remind me of the DC Everest logo trees, and so that's what I associate it with more than the Village of Weston. So if you take the half moon thing off, that's what I get, is more, that's my first thought is DC Everest, which I don't think is good or bad, it's just where my brain went, not so much affiliated with the village government.
And I don't think that's necessarily a problem,
Yeah.
because even though they're not directly involved, they're indirectly involved in this
Right.
process.
Yeah,
DC Everest baseball. So.
Well,
yeah, so I,
DC Everest baseball, but I mean, the school utilizes the fields there too, so it's not just youth baseball, youth softball, youth hockey, skate park, it's also, you know, DC Everest baseball.
Right.
School ball, to be specific, because we have JV softball there, we have 8th grade baseball there, we have freshman baseball there sometimes. So they are utilizing the fields also, so even though they're not involved, they are involved because they've been to our meetings too, as far as the fundraising group. At least the 2 that I've been to, they were there.
I guess my recommendation is just get rid of the West logo thing and let them deal with what the hell they want to put there.
And I think that's something that's totally doable, and then you just add the home plate or the hockey sticks, or, you know, a skater, you know.
Playground equipment.
Playground equipment, whatever it is, just add it specific to make it like that, but lose
Not a
the,
bathroom though, right?
no. We're not fundraising for bathrooms. We're only fundraising for,
We don't have to, we already have the places there.
And I don't wanna speak for Sarah, but I think she also just wants to make sure that the committee, that there's a comfort level, right? Like it's a understanding it's separate but still together. I think she just wants to make sure that she knows that this also represents the village and that it's a good representation.
I think the color
Yeah.
scheme gives it that look like it's
Yeah.
part of, but not. And I think, to me, like I said, if you could just get rid of the logo part of it and let them deal with how they want to, what they want to put in its place.
yeah, I mean, through our meeting with her, she's like, it ultimately is a village park.
Mhm.
So you're fundraising for something, but it's still a village park. So what is the village's tie to that? Well, it's a village park, for sure. And we're still gonna have to dictate what actually takes place there. They can fundraise all they want, but we still have to dictate what gets installed, where it gets installed, etc. When, yes. So anybody wanna
Okay.
entertain a motion based
Yeah.
on discussion, or?
I was just gonna say, I'll make a motion to remove the village logo and allow the Friends of Kennedy Park to insert whatever sport logo or that they would choose. Or whatever.
Second.
Motion by Ermeling, second by Isker. Motion's been approved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any more in discussion? Opposed, motion passed.
So the next item is the agreement with the Community Foundation. An agreement that was ultimately entered into by DC Everest Youth Baseball. They are a nonprofit entity, which was part of the process of actually entering an agreement with them. Because the village is technically not nonprofit. So what they ultimately are doing, it is a pass-through fund. They accept all the donations. They accept all the funds, and then they ultimately pay all the bills.
Sounds like a win.
So they do retain a 5% fee for overseeing the process, paying the bills, etc. And that was one of the items that we wanted to make sure we brought up, that they actually retain that 5%. I mean, ultimately, it's funds that are donated or raised by Friends of Kennedy Park Group. But they oversee the whole process. They take care of filing all the necessary tax documents as far as funds raised, bills paid out, all that. So it's something that, thank you letters, yes, so it doesn't require the village to oversee a lot of that.
That was gonna be one of my questions. Who's gonna oversee this? Because you can just see where somebody's gonna wonder about that, you know.
And basically, if there's excess funds, they oversee them in perpetuity. So if we have future bills for maintenance or improvements, those funds could still be utilized through the Community Foundation. They don't just sit there or disappear. So it's a process that we talked through with our finance director, which Remote has utilized Community Foundation in the past. So literally, it allows those funds to remain there for future, or if they're even added to in future. So the packet was modified from Thursday to Friday. The agenda wasn't changed, but we didn't have the document, and then we inserted it and was sent back out on Friday. And ultimately, the village got one that signs this agreement.
Is 5% pretty standard across the board, or does it depend on the project size?
5% for them is standard, but we don't have anything to gauge that on as far as other entities that actually do this. So that is what their request is. And we've never been able to do something like this with them. We have received funds from Community Foundation, but we've never had them as our entity or passer.
So after Sarah's presentation, then they approve or?
Yeah, so their board will review the entire presentation and then determine which of the 4 projects ideally that were made requests, if they will fund them at what amount. It could be a single year, it could be multi-year, but they also have a separate entity that you can apply for grant funds, and it opens back up on July 1, it's open till July 31. So they only accept applications twice a year. So you got January 1, January 31st, then July 1, July 31st, which is also, we were suggested to apply for grant funds by the Marathon County Parks Foundation for the Yellow Banks location for the improvements there. But I also question if we're applying for grant funds for that, if that hurts our application for Kennedy Park. So, I mean, we still have a window here of, a month plus to determine if we want to do that. We did apply for the state and federal grants, but we haven't applied through the Community Foundation, which was a recommendation by Marathon County Parks Foundation.
Sean, so just to be clear, this is an agreement between not the Village of Weston and the Community Foundation.
No,
It's
Everest Youth Baseball.
Right, okay, so then technically, there's nothing for us to approve or not approve. If they're comfortable going into this agreement with them, then that's ultimately, they're a separate body than us.
Yes, and ultimately, we just want to make sure that you are aware that 5% of the future donations would be going to them. And it's not, like you said, it's their agreement, not ours, but we want to be transparent
Sure.
through the whole process and just make sure that you're aware that, you know,
And then-
potentially
Yeah,
some of those funds are being dispersed to them
right.
for the
So
process.
then the follow-up is in regarding Marathon County Parks. Marathon County Parks. Applying for, encouraging us to apply for Yellow Branks grant money. Since we are a separate body, I don't know if it would be seen as in competition. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I mean, ultimately, the Friends of Kennedy Park will be the ones applying for and receiving grants through this agreement. And that'll be separate of us.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any action for this body to take other than to be informed.
Other than maybe letting them know that, you know, we agree with their decision.
And that's why the RFP is written the way it is, so it's discussion and possible action.
Right.
You don't need to take action, there'd be just discussion on it.
I think we would want the minutes though to reflect whether or not there was a
Consensus.
consensus or that we felt good about that, just because when we will take out essentially the request for proposals where the work is done, and then we'll be signing off to have them pay the bills for those out of these funds, right? So.
Or could you even just do a motion to,
You could just take consensus of the committee and not necessarily take a motion.
Well, I think
To move
Sarah would
forward.
like a motion, because her presentation was stellar, by the way. If you saw it, but, she put a lot of work into it over Memorial Weekend.
well,
And her pictures, sure, her pictures went with the story, how she told the story, her, you know, her emotion and passion behind it. I just, for the record, it was awesome. So I think
We're totally on board with that too.
right.
We were there,
Yeah,
we watched
it
it.
was awesome. So I can make a motion, right? So I would move to recommend the agreement with the Community Foundation. Do we have a second?
A second.
Second by Clark. Motion's been approved. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any more in discussion?
I was just gonna say, you got that backwards. Whether to recommend or to just have to allow them to move forward with the agreement, we are, you know,
I think either is fine.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, opposed? Motion passed.
Kind of,
What?
did we vote?
You voted, yep. Yeah.
Okay, number 8, discussion and possible action, Kennedy Park engineering proposals.
So we received 3 proposals for the development of the surveying and construction documents for Kennedy Park. Michael, I, and Jamie thoroughly reviewed them. Michael and I both re-reviewed them this weekend, I believe. So he had a lengthy response this morning. And I looked at them Saturday just to make sure. I also touched base with all 3 engineering firms today, just to make sure that because they are so different, that they were all providing the same end product that we're looking for. So the last one I talked to was Point of Beginning, and they didn't feel comfortable with me doing an estimate of 100 per hour or 150. They said 120. So I came up with a 88,080 if we're putting a lump sum dollar amount on it. We also talked with Rettler. I talked with them. They're still comfortable with their massive amounts of design time, which is 400 hours compared to the other firms. So there's still ultimately would be the highest. Point of Beginning came in at second, which they were, if you average their hours out regardless, they would have been first if we used 100, but they weren't comfortable with that number. And then REI came in at 76,600, which is a lump sum amount. They're comfortable. I made sure they're all designing all 5 phases. That was the big concern from literally across the board was, are they designing all 5? Because they felt like they weren't equal because, you know, they thought, well, REI came in low because they're only really designing phase 1. And then when it comes to 2, 3, 4, and 5, there's gonna be additional work. When I touched base with Josh today, Josh Prentice, he stated that, no, it is literally design of all 5 phases. Bidding documents are included, and that is the full project. And if you read through the other proposals, they came in at percentage based. So point of beginning was 1.75, or it was 2.5, based on overall construction. Well, overall construction, and I talked to 2 firms today that both put a number way lower than the 14+ million that was in the master plan. They're both under 10 based on what they feel like construction will actually cost for the master plan at Kennedy. So we're still sitting with REI at the lowest. They may not have the most experience based on their proposal, but they have done the design phases for mostly Wausau East, Wausau West. They do have items in their portfolio. They could definitely do a grading plan. We've worked with them before. The electrical, sewer, water, stormwater that were requested in the RFP. And I talked with both Michael and our new engineer today, just to make sure, because they deal with this stuff on a regular basis compared to our normal work, so.
And that was a recommendation
REI.
by staff to go to REI. Okay. Is Point of Beginning and Rattler, they're not local, are they?
They're both Stevens Point. And they're both using sub-consultants for some of the work. And they're both using the same sub-consultant, which is MSA.
My concern was there was such a big gap, because I.
And that's
contacted
always a
you.
concern. That's why I
and
wanted to make sure we thoroughly explained why there's such a big gap. And Michael went through it initially and then again, this weekend, just to go over the amount of design hours, which is literally 100+ hours for the other 2 firms, then Rattler's got 400+ hours of design.
Actually, they have like 1,200 hours if you go through all.
Yeah, if you go
The
through
phases.
all the phases.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to recommend awarding the Kennedy Park engineering contract to our REA.
REI.
REI, I'm sorry, I knew I flipped my screen just as I did that. Okay, where did I go?
Motion by Ermeling,
I'll second it.
second by Isker. Motion's been approved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any more in discussion? Opposed, motion passed. Discussion and possible action, naming rights policy.
So the naming rights policy is also part of the whole process of going through the Kennedy Park fundraising. And as part of that, we did do a draft of a naming rights policy. It is based on another policy from another community, but we wanted to get a draft out there that covered that. I mean, it only is naming rights. We didn't look at sponsorships because we feel like that's a completely separate item. If you get the naming rights on each field, you don't necessarily have sponsorships. So Wausau does sponsorships on the naming rights at people's former East Bay complex, soccer complex, now it's People's complex. They also do sponsorships on their playground there. So, and they do a 3-year concept for sponsorships. Whereas we're proposing that you do if you provide a donation that, covers 51% of the construction costs of that particular area, naming rights would remain for a minimum of 30 years. And there's a lot of other information in that naming rights policy, as far as how you name it, some requirements. And some of the items that, you know, you don't necessarily want to take place as far as the naming of the facility.
Did you get any suggestions from Sarah as far as naming policy? You know, what would be best for them when they're out fundraising and?
We did. I mean, we talked with her about the naming policy. She thought that putting a specific amount of years on it was something that needed to be done. I think she said 40. I went for 30 just because I felt like 30 was pretty sufficient as far as a long time. It could be 40. And then we also talked about what Jamie and I had talked about was making sure that, you know, and it was based on Stephen's point of naming rights policy was that, you know, they had to exceed 50% of the total construction costs of that area as far as naming rights. Because we don't feel like changing the name of Kennedy Park is ever gonna happen. But it could be the so-and-so complex at Kennedy Park. It's still gonna be Kennedy Park. I mean, we know, we did some research. It was originally Jellick Park. Donated, the land was donated by the Jellick family. And then after 1963 assassination, it was renamed Kennedy. And it's been in place a long time. Like somebody already said tonight, everybody knows where Kennedy Park is, right? So we know there's another naming issue going on in this area. And we don't want to delve into that, and because this one's been around way longer even. I don't feel like that's even a possibility of renaming the entire park.
It's a staple park of Weston, really, so we don't really.
Yeah, I mean.
Are there so just for fun, are there sort of layers to this? So there's the naming rights for
Could be the field, the
the Kennedy,
playgrounds.
right, so there's Kennedy Park, and then there's a baseball complex. And then there's all sorts of stuff underneath there.
Yeah, and I think most items are large items. I think you get into the sponsorships, like you say, the batting cages for this field that's gonna be something smaller. That's gonna be like sponsorship
Right.
versus the field's gonna be named after this.
Right.
So I think the sponsorships come later, but if you say, you know, the first diamond in phase one is 600, 700,000. If someone contributes 360,000.
Right.
And that.
That field's gonna be named after them. Whatever name they want, that's approved by obviously the committee of the board, would be named that for the next 30 years.
So how does that, just for fun, so the Jones Field at the baseball or at the complex in Kennedy Park, right? That's what we're saying? That's
I think
sort of
each field
That's how
is-
they'd stack?
Well, if you actually had to put like a label to it
Yeah.
and advertise it, but I think if you're just naming them.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that that's a terrible name, but I'm
It's a
just trying to
horrible
sort of, because so then I can chip in for a field, or I can chip in for the complex, or Lord willing, I can buy the naming rights to the whole thing, right? And so.
We're ready.
Yeah, right, I'm just saying, right, somebody shows up with $7 million, they get to name the thing whatever they want, I suppose. But I'm just trying to, and then sponsorship is essentially signage in the outfields and signage on the batting cage and signage on benches and stuff like that.
It could be multiple things. So they do individual signs at the, you know, the playground at
Right,
people's sports complex. They do it for the complex itself. They don't go extravagant. Like you're not gonna put up a $20,000 sign for 3 years.
right,
You're putting a sign like this big that recognizes the group that's sponsoring it for the
Yeah.
next 3 years. So I think that's ultimately the idea for that type of thing. But it could be something completely different, but you know, it could be, like you said, Jones 1, and that's all it has to be. It doesn't have to be at Kennedy Park at this complex. So ultimately, everybody knows it's Kennedy Park. And then we have this complex. It just depends on, like you said, the what you're putting out there as far as media. If you wanna, spread the word, this tournament at this complex at Kennedy Park.
Yeah,
Well, I
so,
think what the reason is like Steam Stadium was named after, one of the earlier personnel, that was there. Then when they wanted to add it, or, yeah, then that's why they did that at Steam Stadium. because
So now it's Stephanie Hagan Field at
at
Steam Stadium.
So
And it's no different than Simon Field, I mean,
Yeah,
and that the policy does address that, if you're naming it after somebody. I mean, they don't the policy ultimately, you don't wanna name it after somebody that's, let's say it lightly, but alive yet. But covers significant contribution to the community or a particular area, et cetera. Or, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a financial contribution, it could be just their contribution to it, I mean. We have a umpire that's coming up on 41 years. At doing the Everest Merchants, 50+ for baseball in general in the Everest area. Could they name something after him? They could, but they want to. That's why the policy is drafted the way it is.
Jamie, I have a quick question. So this policy is in a draft format right now. But it's, as we talked about, the Friends of are going to be out there fundraising. So how would this policy have to be finalized within the village to sort of bind them in their because they're out there talking essentially for us. And so how does a policy like this have to move through the governing bodies?
So it would have to be a recommendation of the policy to the board, and then the board would have to approve the policy, and we would place the policy probably within our handbook to say, here's our policy for naming rights, like we have a policy for
Right.
memorials.
And then would there be like a memo of understanding between us and the Friends to sort of say, this is our guideline and you're,
Yep, we would provide it to the Friends would provide it to the donor, so the donor would be aware that it would still need the approval process. And the donation likely would be contingent on that approval.
Okay.
So if someone wanted to, if it was half of the cost of 51% of the cost of a field to name it a certain thing, they would know that it would have to go through that process and then the donation would be released. Yeah, and we don't have the naming rights policy on the board tonight just because we want you to look at it and get some comfort around it because it will live for a long time if someone would give that dollar amount. So we would just wanna make sure that we.
so I don't think this would be approved tonight by this body.
No, so I mean.
Yeah.
Feedback, if you have a recommendation with changes, it could go to the board on the 17th.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a real problem with, other than the fact that, say if somebody does give 51% and they can name it. I would hope that we have approval of what that name might be. I mean, you don't want some.
Yeah,
It's in there.
It's
That's
in there, I know, I was reading. Okay.
No, and
I
we
had gone
cover,
down that far here.
it covers, that you have to
I thought I
approve
read
it because you don't want somebody naming it something improper and then we're required to do that based on their
So
donation.
then if we take the policy, essentially take it home, find our comfort level with it and give it back to you, then it would come back to this body again for a recommendation or not recommendation to the whole Board of Trustees. And then in the following Board of Trustees meeting, it would go to them.
Yes.
Does it go to finance at all? Or, okay,
Unless
Yeah,
it's
it
gonna
says right
cost a lot
here.
of money.
Generally
Whatever.
51%.
We totally understand you've only had since Thursday,
Yeah, I
and we didn't want to put it on the board agenda tonight because we want you to feel comfortable with it. But ultimately, I mean, as soon as we start fundraising, they'd like to have this policy in place. So then they can, you know, relay the message on to people that are possibly donating what is available to them.
We move on to number 10 then. Discussion and possible action, development of pickleball court design requests for proposals.
So since we approved the master plan and the corp back in December, there's been discussion as far as the pickleball courts at Mockmuller. There's been a couple items brought up previously as far as possibly, you know, relocating them to an alternate location. But it's been brought up the last couple board meetings. And that pickleball group is one of those entities that is ready to move forward with starting fundraising. So to be able to fundraise, ideally, they would have a accurate cost estimate and design work completed for the process. I think most people are comfortable with the fact that it was in the corp as far as being located at Mockmuller. As far as location, you know, parking availability of property, et cetera. But there's been no one's budgeted for the design. Based on our current cost estimate, which is a rough one, we're looking at least 1.5 million, could be more than that, for 16 courts. But there was some discussion, I believe, at the last board meeting as far as possibly utilizing some room tax dollars for the design work. And if that's something we should pursue as far as request for proposal. The process moving forward.
My question back when that was talked about of using the room tax money, is that, is that our portion that we put in our own budget?
So there's the Weston only portion, and then
Yeah,
there's
but
the
that's separate from.
from the portion that goes to the CVB.
Okay,
That
there's a
is their
difference.
portion, yes. I understand that there's two portions.
Yeah,
So there's Weston events only that goes to CVB, and then there's the Weston portion that we retain.
right, and then there's the general, which is
Yeah.
You take this from the 30, our retainage.
Yeah, from our retainage.
our retaining.
From our CIP.
At the CI.
We don't, what do we put into CIP for tourism? Because I thought if it goes into CIP, then it's part of the,
Right, but if we take it out of that part, then we're messing with our budget. Because we're using that for purchasing equipment and we give part of that already to the pool.
And it's
So
all-
if
it's all
that's
projected-
the
It's all
fund,
projected too.
yeah, if that's where we're gonna take it from, then I wouldn't agree with
we
that.
give part of our 30% tourism to the pool. We don't give CIP to the pool.
So a portion of the
Correct.
tourism dollars goes into the capital improvement fund.
And there's a 40,000 that goes directly from room tax to people.
Okay.
Okay, so that confused me and I don't think I needed to be confused, but I'm cool with that. So what is the question for this discussion?
So if we should put out the RFP.
Oh.
And then we would obviously come up with a dollar amount that finance would look at as far as funding. Because right now, we don't know that dollar amount to develop those construction documents. I mean, we could do a rough estimate, but we have never put together construction documents for pickleball courts, 16 of them. And you know, trustee that has done some preliminary work on the process, has refined the previous estimate we had based on best practices right now as far as surfacing, concrete, orientation, fencing, entrances, et cetera. So to get an accurate cost estimate on that, an RFP for construction documents would, you know, be a step forward in that process, which would give them the option to be able to start fundraising.
Okay.
Because
Even if we
The RFP doesn't bind us to anything other than the information brought in.
No,
Okay.
we submit a request for proposals, they provide proposals, and then you don't have to award it
Who's paid for
for what?
the proposals?
So the village will put out the RFP, which would be
Okay,
our
that's
time,
just your time.
involved in putting it together.
Okay.
That's really what we're asking. Do you want us to
Okay.
invest the time? And they provide the proposals for free. And then, it comes in front of you.
Yeah, well, I
comes in front
just
of
was
the board.
wondering if, what cost was involved with that, or if there was, where it was coming from.
It's staff time.
Okay. Because like I said, when I kept hearing this all the time about using room tax for it, and I was getting to the point where, if you're looking at pulling it out of the capital improvement budget, that that was not, I wasn't going to be agreeable to that.
I think we're gonna find the funds in tourism, so. And use staff time for the RFP, so should be okay.
So I'll make a motion to recommend developing an RFP and distributing it to potential consultants.
I'll second.
Motion by Corvino, second by Isker. Motion's been approved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any more in discussion? Oppose? Motion passed. Okay, so number 11, possible next meeting date, June 17th, 2024. Topics for future meetings.
Nothing listed. Do you have anything you want to discuss?
No, just maybe a budget for tourism, like what we can use for pickleball. Out of those funds.
But ultimately, that would be a finance question.
Okay.
I mean, as far as determining if the village could fund it.
I just don't know where.
I know you're looking at me like that, but ultimately it goes to finance. You guys don't
Yeah, I
determine
know.
if the village can afford it, it would go to finance and board for that. So, I mean, we'll have plenty of updates with playground equipment, community park construction, possibly. Pool's going open now. I mean, we definitely have a ton going on right now. So.
Could we get a report on the work done by G Morty?
Okay,
Also, yeah, are we able to do those logos in-house as well? It's a G Morty. I know Rachel has some background in that. We have the software.
so we're under contract with them right now
Okay.
for the marketing stuff for Kennedy, so it is all part of the contract. Which has already been approved.
Fair enough. Remarks from committee members. Announcements. Parks and Rec meeting. Motion by Isker, second by Ermeling. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any more in discussion? Motion will pass. Parks and Rec meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you all.
We can